How did an object barely the size of a shoebox come to rewrite our understanding of ancient science? The answer began not in a university lecture hall, but deep beneath the Mediterranean Sea, beneath waves that had swallowed ships, treasures, and entire truths. It was the year 1901. A group of sponge divers drifting near the tiny Greek island of Antikythera plunged into the depths for their usual haul. But what they found was not sea sponge. It was a ghost ship, an ancient Roman wreck that had slumbered there for nearly 2,000 years. Among the encrusted statues, amphorae, and bronze coins, one diver returned to the surface clutching something strange. At first glance, it looked like a lump of corroded metal and stone, a curiosity, nothing more. But inside this corroded mess lay a secret that would take over a century to fully awaken. What they had found unknowingly was a shattered relic that would come to be known as the Antikythera Mechanism. And unlike anything else in the wreck, this was not a weapon nor a statue. It was a machine, one with gears, dials, teeth. A device from over 2 millennia ago, built with a precision modern scientists struggled to explain. Historians at first ignored it. Museums shelved it. The object sat in silence, its voice locked away in oxidized bronze. But then something began to shift. With the rise of advanced imaging and 3D scanning in the late 20th century, a few daring researchers returned to this artifact, and what they began to uncover defied every textbook definition of ancient Greek technology. Beneath layers of corrosion, they discovered complex interlocking gears. Not just one or two, but over 30 made with precise tooth ratios and alignments. This was no toy, no simple sundial. This was a device that tracked celestial movements, possibly even eclipses, with a level of accuracy that would not be matched again until mechanical clocks were developed in the 14th century. Let that settle in for a moment. Something built in 100 BCE or earlier could model the cosmos. But what was it doing on a Roman shipwreck? Why had it been lost? And who had the knowledge to build such a thing? You start to imagine yourself underwater, swimming alongside the divers. You see the broken body of a once mighty ship scattered like bones across the seafloor. You brush aside centuries of sediment and see it a gear, small, but perfectly shaped. What kind of civilization could create such precision and then vanish, leaving only fragments behind? As the mechanism was slowly reconstructed in modern labs piece by piece, like an ancient puzzle, a strange truth emerged. It contained more than just timekeeping. It seemed to possess multiple functions, one for tracking the sun, another for the moon's complex orbit, even one to predict eclipses, using something eerily similar to the Saros cycle, a concept known today only through advanced astronomy. And all this was done with bronze by hand. Pause and think you're holding a bronze calculator in your hand. You turn a knob, and it tells you the position of the moon 50 years in the future. It predicts lunar eclipses. It reveals ancient Greek athletic events like the Olympics based on their specific calendars. It even shows how the moon's orbit wobbles, what scientists call the lunar anomaly, something we didn't model mechanically until the era of Newton. How? The sponge divers had unknowingly unearthed a relic from a vanished science, one that seemed out of place in history, a device you'd expect to find in a 19th century workshop, not in a Roman wreck near a forgotten Greek island. And yet there it was. The fragments, now split into 82 separate pieces, spoke in silence, but not all were listening. For decades, mainstream academia dismissed the idea that ancient Greeks could have had machines of such complexity. It didn't fit the narrative. It made the philosophers look more like engineers, and the temples more like laboratories. This was not the story the world wanted to hear, but the mechanism refused to be forgotten. Like a whisper rising from the depths, its very existence posed a challenge. What if we've underestimated the ancients? What if beneath the columns of Parthenon and the pages of Plato lies a deeper, more hidden knowledge, one that fused astronomy mechanics and sacred geometry? Some called it the world's first analog computer. Others warned that this was just one of many such devices now lost to time and corrosion. But all agreed on one thing: it was centuries ahead of its time, and someone somewhere had built it with a purpose. The questions began to multiply. Who made it? Why was it taken aboard a Roman ship? Was it a gift, a trophy, or part of something bigger? Imagine a world where temples were observatories, where sacred rituals were timed not by faith alone, but by machinery that read the sky. A civilization where science and spirit were not enemies, but partners. The Antikythera Mechanism cracked open that vision, even if just slightly. And so the journey begins, not just into history, but into memory. The memory of a world we forgot. A world that might have been far more advanced, more spiritually attuned, and more mechanically gifted than we ever imagined. And if this machine could track the stars, what else could it do? For over a century, the Antikythera Mechanism sat like a riddle no one could fully read. At first, scholars didn't even recognize what they were looking at. When the fragments were brought to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, they were cataloged and largely ignored. The metal was corroded, the dials unreadable, gears locked in a bronze tomb. It looked like an accident of nature, not a product of ancient intellect. But one man, Derek J. DeSolla Price, a physicist from Yale, saw something others missed. In the 1950s, Price began to study the fragments in detail. What he uncovered would send ripples through the academic world. The gears weren't randomly shaped. They were calculated, cut to specific sizes with exact ratios like modern clockwork. Not one or two gears, but over 30, some nested, some stacked, some hidden beneath thin plates of bronze. This was no sculpture. This was a machine. In his now famous 1974 paper, Gears from the Greek's Price made a claim that stunned historians. The mechanism was capable of predicting celestial positions decades in advance. The moon's phases, the movement of the sun, eclipses, all calculated using hand-cranked gears. It was, he said, like finding a jet plane in the tomb of King Tut. But Price only had basic X-rays and hand sketches to work with. Much of the device remained a mystery, its inscriptions too worn to read its true purpose, still cloaked in corroded secrecy. So for decades, the mechanism was both revered and misunderstood. A curiosity, a marvel, but not yet fully awakened. Then in the early 2000s, technology caught up. A team of international scientists, known as the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, was formed. They used 3D X-ray tomography, a kind of CT scan for metal, to peer inside the object without damaging it. What they saw changed everything. Layers of gears, pin and slot mechanisms, tiny inscriptions no wider than the width of a grain of rice, calendars, celestial cycles, names of planets, eclipse prediction formulas, Greek festivals, and even staggeringly, a model of the Metonic cycle, which synchronizes solar and lunar calendars over 19 years. Suddenly, the question wasn't if it was a computer. It was how many functions did it really have? The more they explored, the more complex it became. One gear tracked the Callipic cycle, a refinement of the 19-year Metonic cycle. Another might have tracked the Olympic Games, marking not just celestial time, but sacred time. Sacred geometry was not an abstract idea here, it had become mechanics. And yet, we still don't know who built it. The inscriptions on the device are written in ancient Greek, suggesting it came from that world. But nothing like it has ever been found again. Not in other Greek ruins, not in Egyptian temples, not in Roman records. The Antikythera Mechanism is a solitary survivor, a one-of-a-kind enigma that seems to appear fully formed like a lost artifact from a different timeline. That silence of absence speaks louder than words. Was this really just one invention by a lone genius? Or was it the last echo of an entire lost discipline? One fringe theory suggests it may be the remnant of a hidden line of knowledge passed down from Babylon to Alexandria to Greece, mathematical, astronomical, spiritual knowledge that was once common among mystery schools and sacred orders. Perhaps the mechanism was built in a temple workshop passed from priest to student, guarded from the masses. Others believe it may have been created in Rhodes, a Greek island known for its astronomical schools, and home to Hipparchus, one of the greatest astronomers of the ancient world. His work on lunar motion and star catalogs matches surprisingly well with the mechanism's functions. Yet there is no record that he or anyone built such a machine. Historians still argue whether the mechanism is a unique wonder or a surviving example of a now-lost class of devices. But here's the strangest part. The engineering is too perfect. The gear teeth are cut in a way that suggests experience, not experiment. This was not a prototype. It was a refined machine, as if whoever built it had already made others. Machines that never survived. You begin to imagine what if there had been shelves of these mechanisms to read eclipses, others to map planetary retrograde, some even to measure the distance of stars using parallax? Could temples once have contained such devices glowing in candlelight, humming softly with the turning of celestial time? It would mean that the Antikythera mechanism isn't just old, it's descended from a lineage, a missing tradition of ancient computing. And what of the shipwreck? The Roman cargo ship that carried the mechanism was likely sailing from the eastern Mediterranean toward Italy. Scholars believe it may have been transporting art scientific instruments or spoils from pillaged cities. Among its cargo were bronze statues, luxury goods, and one broken device that would change the world. Was the mechanism a gift? A stolen treasure? A sacred object being smuggled to safety as empires fell? We don't know, but the deeper you look, the more it feels like fate. That something or someone preserved this object for us, left it buried just long enough for technology to rise again to meet it halfway. As if the past had reached forward and placed a puzzle in our hands asking, can you remember what we once knew? Imagine holding a machine in your hands that knows the sky, not just today's sky, but the sky of tomorrow, the sky of 1,000 tomorrows. That's what the Antikythera mechanism seemed to offer, not merely information, but knowledge encoded into movement, into bronze, into turning gears that mimicked the very dance of the heavens. The more researchers turned its gears literally and metaphorically, the more it whispered secrets, long buried. And those secrets were astronomical in both senses of the word, because within its delicate teeth and faded inscriptions lay an uncanny awareness of cosmic cycles knowledge that should have required telescopes, observatories, and centuries of trial and error. And yet, it was all there. Let's begin with one of the most mesmerizing features, the Saros dial. The Saros cycle is a period of about 18 years, 11 days and 8 hours, after which eclipses repeat. That knowledge alone is astounding. It means that whoever built the Antikythera mechanism not only tracked the moon, but recognized a long-term pattern that requires decades of careful, uninterrupted observation. And yet the mechanism encodes it. The dial is marked with small glyphs denoting solar and lunar eclipses, along with notations of their timing and character. Think about that. The device doesn't just tell time, it foresees cosmic events. As you turn its handle, you're stepping into the role of an oracle not through magic, but through mathematics. But the Saros cycle is only part of it. Another dial models the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period, after which the phases of the moon realign with the same dates of the solar year. This allowed the user to synchronize lunar and solar calendars, essential for both farming and ritual. And there's more: a dial for the Calippic cycle, a refinement of the Metonic, another for the Exeligmos, a triple Saros used to improve eclipse predictions, and evidence that the mechanism modeled the synodic cycles of the 5 visible planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Wait, did you catch that? This device wasn't just tracking the sun and moon. It knew the complex retrograde motion of the planets, how they sometimes appear to loop backward in the sky. That motion confused ancient stargazers for centuries. But whoever built the Antikythera mechanism didn't just understand it, they mechanized it. It gets stranger. On the front face of the mechanism beneath a rotating pointer was a zodiac dial. 12 sections, just like modern astrology. But this wasn't a horoscope tool. It was an astronomical calendar, matching dates with constellations and planetary movements. You could see when Mars would rise in Scorpio, or when Venus would disappear in Virgo. It merged science and the sacred as if the builder saw no distinction. There's something almost alchemical about it. A machine made of base metals yet holding skyfire within. Ancient Greeks, especially those influenced by Pythagorean thought, believed the universe operated according to harmonies of numbers. Music orbits and sacred geometry, they were all part of the same divine fabric. And this machine, it was a hymn to that logic. The gears weren't thrown together. Each one had a specific number of teeth, forming ratios that mirrored celestial cycles. The gear train linking solar and lunar motion was a masterpiece of mathematical compression, translating complex astronomical phenomena into a physical form anyone could use if they were trained in its secrets. Now step back. Imagine you're standing in an ancient temple. Torches flicker against columns. A priestess approaches a bronze box, turns a crank, and suddenly the future of the heavens unfolds on its dials. Not magic, not guessing, but mechanical prophecy. Some fringe researchers have speculated that the mechanism wasn't just a calculator, but a teaching tool or even a spiritual device. That in the right hands, it offered access to the divine order. That perhaps its very purpose was to help initiate students into the language of the stars. Could it have been used in Eleusinian mysteries, in Delphic rituals? Could it have been one of the machines of wisdom Plato hinted at, built by those who understood both matter and meaning? Historians still debate the full list of functions. Because here's the truth, we haven't recovered all the pieces. Only about a third of the original mechanism survives. It's like trying to understand a grand symphony from a handful of notes. And yet even those fragments suggest a complexity far beyond what anyone thought ancient engineers could build. And they didn't leave us a manual. No texts, no blueprints, no teacher's guide. Just one broken device slowly being read like scripture. And here's where things become even more mysterious. Some of the symbols on the mechanism are unusual. They don't appear in standard Greek records. There are hints of Babylonian astronomy, of Egyptian-style calendrical systems. It suggests not a purely Greek origin, but a fusion of ancient traditions, a crossroads of forgotten knowledge, a kind of esoteric science encoded in bronze. So what was the mechanism really? A calendar, a planetarium, a sacred model of the cosmos, or something more? Maybe it wasn't built to calculate the heavens. Maybe it was built to mirror them, to turn the unknowable sky into something graspable, to place divine motion into the hands of mortals, a way of saying, we see the stars, and we understand their rhythm. And if that's true, then the Antikythera mechanism is more than a machine. It is a memory made metal, a whisper from the sky waiting to be heard again. Who could have built such a thing? That question more than any other gnaws at the edges of historical certainty. Because when you hold the Antikythera mechanism in your mind, its finely cut gears, its encoded cycles, its cosmic calculations, you can't help but wonder, is this really the work of a single culture? Or is it the visible tip of something deeper, older, forgotten? Mainstream scholars often point to Hipparchus, the Greek astronomer active around 150 BCE. He was known for developing precise lunar theories and mapping over 800 stars. His work on epicycles and eccentrics, the ways planets appear to move in loops and circles, matches suspiciously well with the lunar gear modeling found in the mechanism. But here's the mystery. Hipparchus's theories were mathematical, abstract. There's no evidence he ever built anything like the Antikythera mechanism. And yet, the machine embodies his calculations. That raises a haunting possibility. Perhaps Hipparchus didn't invent those theories. Perhaps he was merely recording knowledge already passed down to him. Knowledge not taught in Athens, but preserved in mystery schools, cloaked temples, or far-off lands, now lost beneath the sea. Take the island of Rhodes, for instance. In its time, it was a hub of knowledge. A naval power, yes, but also a home for philosophers and astronomers. The great Posidonius taught there. The island even housed a renowned observatory. Could the mechanism have been crafted in one of its workshops, or protected within its temples? Or could it have come from Alexandria, the city of Alexander, the city of books and light? Before the Library of Alexandria was burned not once, but likely many times, it was said to contain hundreds of thousands of scrolls, some of them describing devices that harness the movements of the stars. Imagine the mechanism as a relic from that vanished archive, smuggled onto a ship perhaps bound for Rome or safety before the flames devoured everything. It would make sense. Alexandria was where Greek, Egyptian, Babylonian, and even Indian knowledge blended. If anywhere on Earth could produce a machine of this kind, it would be there. But there's another possibility. One more controversial. What if the mechanism wasn't a beginning, but an echo? What if the knowledge it embodies didn't originate with the Greeks at all, but was inherited from a civilization far older? Consider this: the Sumerians tracked Venus over thousands of years. The Egyptians aligned temples with solstices, using incredible precision. The builders of Stonehenge and Nabta Playa? How did they know the sky so well? Even Plato hints at this. In his dialogues, he writes of Atlantis, a once great civilization destroyed in a flood, but one that possessed incredible technology and understanding of the stars. Modern historians scoff. They label Atlantis a myth, a metaphor. But ask yourself this: if you found a machine at the bottom of the sea, one capable of modeling the cosmos with terrifying accuracy, wouldn't you say the same thing? That it couldn't be real, and yet, there it is. Some researchers have suggested that the Antikythera mechanism may be a survivor of a forgotten scientific tradition. That while history remembers the wars, the kings, the poets, the real keepers of knowledge were the engineers of the sacred. The ones who built with purpose, aligning machines with stars, temples with constellations, rituals with the turning of the earth. It's not just the mechanism that hints at this. Consider the Baghdad battery, a clay jar with copper and iron elements possibly capable of generating small voltages. Or the strange holes drilled into massive stones at Pumapunku holes, so smooth they seem made by modern machinery. Or even the Vimanas of India, flying machines described in Sanskrit texts with rotating parts and aerial capabilities. Could the mechanism be part of that forgotten puzzle? A piece of an ancient technological continuum, a sacred science that saw no difference between metal and magic, between orbit and omen. Historians still argue whether the Greeks invented such devices themselves, or whether they merely preserved fragments of something older. But the silence of the record is telling. There is no mention of the mechanism in surviving ancient texts. None. No description, no manual, no copy. As if its very existence had to be forgotten. Perhaps it was too powerful. Or perhaps simply it came from a culture so thoroughly erased by time that only one machine remained. You imagine the craftsman who built it. Bronze shavings on his hands. Stars etched in his mind. He tightens a tiny gear, inscribes a glyph, and whispers a prayer not to a god, but to the order of the cosmos itself. And then the sea takes it all. Until now. Until divers find it again in rust and ruin. Until machines scan it layer by layer. Until the old machine whispers, "Remember me." This is what makes the Antikythera mechanism so haunting. Not just that it exists, but that it feels intentional, as if someone somewhere wanted us to find it again. Not as a tool, but as a message that says, we understood the stars. We knew the harmony of the heavens. And you can know it too, if you choose to remember. What happens when a machine like this is found? Not just found, but understood. Not just understood, but believed. The Antikythera mechanism stands at the edge of two worlds. On one side is the world of accepted history emperors and wars treaties and trade routes the straight line of progress from ignorance to knowledge. On the other side is something older, deeper, a world where the ancients understood more than we dare admit. And in that space between the mechanism turns, it has no digital interface, no wires, no screens. And yet it performs calculations as subtle as lunar anomaly and eclipse prediction. It doesn't run on electricity, but on thought-made metal, human memory rendered into movement, philosophy forged into bronze. So what does it mean? Mainstream historians now largely agree that the Antikythera Mechanism is real, ancient, and astonishingly complex. But they stop short. They call it an anomaly, an outlier, a fluke of genius, a brilliant exception in an otherwise primitive technological age. But what if it's not the exception? What if it's a glimpse of something far more expansive? An entire class of forgotten machines, lost books, unrecorded knowledge. What if the real anomaly is not the mechanism, but our refusal to believe it fits? Because once you accept that this level of sophistication existed in 100 BCE, you begin to question everything else. If they had computational astronomy, did they have other tools? If they could predict eclipses, did they use this knowledge for more than curiosity? Was this machine connected to agriculture, ritual navigation, sacred festivals? Think about this. The back panel of the mechanism lists major athletic events, the Olympics, the Nemean Games with their respective locations and cycles. This wasn't just about space. It was about time, sacred time, ritual cycles, human life mirrored in the stars. Suddenly the machine doesn't look like a calculator. It looks like a portal, one that connects the cosmic to the communal, the heavens to the earth. And here's the more unsettling question. Why did we forget it? Why did this knowledge vanish? Some say it was the collapse of Greek culture. Others blame the rise of Rome with its pragmatic engineering and distaste for useless philosophy. Still others point to the fires, especially the burning of the Library of Alexandria, a wound in human memory so deep we may never know what was lost. But perhaps the truth is even darker. Perhaps this kind of knowledge was forbidden, not because it was evil, but because it empowered. Because a population that understood the sky, that grasped the rhythms of energy and time, that could build machines in the image of the stars, might not bow so easily, might not need gods or kings. Knowledge like that isn't forgotten by accident. It's buried. It's erased. And the Antikythera Mechanism. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be found. Maybe it was the one that got away. A cosmic message in a bottle. A reminder that ancient science was not crude. That ancient wisdom was not superstition. That ancient engineers may have understood something we're only just beginning to reclaim. Today, scientists use quantum computers, space telescopes, particle accelerators. But all of them at their core are trying to do what the mechanism already did, reveal the structure of the universe. With each passing year, we reverse engineer more of its secrets. We learn that its gear ratios match astronomical observations with shocking accuracy. We learn that its inscriptions may preserve lost calendars. We learn that it might have modeled the motions of Venus, including its strange, almost flower-like, retrograde cycle. And still it gives us more questions than answers. You wonder what would happen if we built one now. Not a replica, but a reimagining. Could we use modern materials to recreate its full form? Could we expand its functions? Could it be the blueprint for a new kind of timekeeping? One that aligns human life with cosmic cycles. Imagine temples built not just of stone, but of movement. Altars that hum with the rhythm of gears, keeping track not of minutes and hours, but of seasons, phases, energetic alignments. Machines not for profit, but for harmony. Because maybe that's what the mechanism truly was, a harmony engine. Not just science, not just spirit, but the perfect fusion of both. A reminder that the universe is not chaos, it is a song. And for a brief moment, long ago, someone built a machine that could play it. So where do we go from here? We remember, we rebuild. We refuse to look at history as a straight line of progress, but as a spiral, as cycles within cycles, like the gears turning within the mechanism. We ask forbidden questions. We open our minds not only to what is proven, but to what is possible. Because the Antikythera Mechanism does not belong in a museum. It belongs in your hands, in your thoughts, in the quiet space between wonder and truth. Let it turn, let it speak, and if you listen closely enough, perhaps you'll hear the stars whispering back. Now close your eyes. Let the sound of turning gears fade into the background. Feel the slow rhythm of celestial time moving all around you. The ticking of stars, the hum of ancient knowledge rising gently like mist over calm water. The Antikythera Mechanism was once lost to the sea, forgotten, silent. But now it lives again in memory, in imagination, and in the hands of those who choose to see the past, not as rubble, but as a buried cathedral of truth. You are part of that awakening. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, let yourself travel to that shipwreck. Let your fingers trace the outline of forgotten inscriptions. Your breath still with reverence as you feel the ancient weight of time settle around you. Remember, the stars above you now are the same stars that once guided those ancient hands. The same moon, the same sun, the same quiet question that lingers in the soul of every seeker. What have we lost? And what might we find again? The journey does not end here. The Antikythera Mechanism is just one note in a vast unplayed symphony of ancient knowledge. And somewhere beneath sands, beneath seas, beneath stone, other notes are waiting to be discovered. Until then, let your dreams be filled with stars and turning wheels. Sleep well, traveler. The past remembers you.